I'm ahead of the curve, and in this video I will be orating my most recent article in defense of the four horsemen of New Atheism. Enjoy. The New Atheists, otherwise known as the Four Horsemen, Richard Dawkins, Daniel Dennett, Sam Harris, and the late Christopher Hitchens, sought to rejuvenate scrutiny towards dogmatic religious faith at the beginning of the millennia in response to the World Trade Center atrocity in 2001, committed by Al-Qaeda. The tragedy was a catalyst for debates after this event to entertain the following questions. Is religious faith dangerous? Do we even need religion? Does God exist? The demand for open dialogue concerning these questions soon became rife. Thus, the birth of the New Atheists and newer atheism took place. I have previously said in other articles and my content on YouTube that the New Atheists were for the most part underwhelming in their philosophical criticisms of theology, specifically monotheism, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. However, whilst a philosophical approach to argue against religion is preferable for those who wish to take the subject more seriously, generally speaking, I believe that this isn't necessarily the point of the New Atheism movement in the first place. The New Atheists, if anything, simply brought questioning religious faith and the concept of God to the table in an accessible and courageous way for the newer intellectually curious generations to come forth. They were the modern pillars, in some sense, of defending disbelief in the current age. The role of the New Atheists was not to create new arguments, but to, albeit dramatically, redistribute them. The New Atheists pointed fingers where fingers needed to be pointed. Their conviction in not allowing the reputable notions and promotions being made in the name of a god and its respectable or unrespectable scripture. To name a few worthy prosecutions: Catholicism's judgment that contraception is worse than STDs, see Mother Teresa, she was not a friend of the poor but a friend of poverty. Islam's theoretical and often practical intolerance towards apostates and blasphemers, and the practice of infant genital mutilation in the twisted command of eternal covenants, Genesis 17:13, in ceremony of God's seemingly misanthropic will. I shall repeat myself to review the above. The instigation behind the New Atheists' endeavours, therefore, was to normalise criticism of religion by demystifying it to their audience. This distinction is worth making when beginning to understand the work of the Four Horsemen of New Atheism. Sympathetic to those who criticise the New Atheists, I too maintain that the Horsemen fail to fairly distinguish between a politically driven hate crime and a genuine religious attack. It is true that the Al-Qaeda proclaimed their allegiance to the religion that is Islam. The interpretation that we can agree matched more their terror-driven motive than adhering to the Quran, and actions done by this group were seemingly in the spirit of the doctrine. The debate remains to be settled on how Islamic they were, as opposed to many moral Muslims that inhabit the world and do not conduct such violent behaviour on such a scale. This is the nuance that makes or breaks the central theme of the New Atheism movement, whether the scriptures themselves are to blame, or those adopting them for their political agenda, which happens to have the scapegoat of religious inspiration, much like when Hitler exploited the church's influence to justify his means despite their ends in promoting the ethos of Nazism. One hurdle to cross is truly defining a religious attack. Is this an attack that is directly sanctioned within Scripture, or is it done in vague association with the themes of said Scripture? Indeed, it could be both. The problem with this is how we define what is supposed to be literal in these holy texts and what is not. This is where context is fundamental in understanding the Quran or the Bible. I believe, which the New Atheists didn't, that we ought to pursue this starting with technical questions regarding historical context, scriptural semantics, and the comparison between an exertion in the name of religion to an exertion sanctioned because of religion. This formal method of investigation is rigorous but obligatory, provided we genuinely seek clarity on this multifaceted matter. This issue is not one that I'm intending to answer within this article, but I would be interested in hearing the readers' or listeners' thoughts as a believer or disbeliever. In conclusion, I concede that the new atheists were not up to the same standard as other thinkers of past times, but they did in fairness acknowledge that they were standing on the shoulders of giants. What they achieved was not so much, even by their perspective, necessarily new in their push against religion and God, but it was to keep that push alive, to ensure disbelievers did not feel alone in their doubts and instead have the gall to inquire, especially in communities where Judaism, Christianity and Islam are ruling social and political entities to be reckoned with. Thus, New Atheism and the Four Horsemen, despite their shortcomings, did offer utility in how they stood against religious fundamentalism at its worst, but also at its most subtle dangers. Their fiery opposition towards religion and God was debatably done with more style than substance, but what they started still lives on, even if they were not necessarily the best representatives of it. Thank you for listening. Please leave your thoughts in the comment section below. What do you think of New Atheism? Do you like Christopher Hitchens? Do you like Sam Harris? Do you think it's completely died at this point, or do you still see Dawkins being relevant today? So I'd be interested to hear your guys' thoughts in the comment section below. What do you think of the Four Horsemen, and do you agree that they have their advantages, but at the same time, clearly they were not up to scratch, at least in their philosophical debating skills, let's say. Anyway, thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next video. Cheers.